I remember this moment in which I was standing with 4 New York City police officers, and one of them said, "Oh, look at that." And we saw what we thought was a giant piece of paper floating to the ground. Actually, it was a woman in a dress. A few moments later, a firefighter said, "Oh my God, look up." And we saw a man and a woman standing in the window. We presumed they were colleagues. And I remember one of the officers said, "Oh, thank God that in this chaotic time, someone was near someone they knew." At about that moment, this man and woman stepped up on the window edge and jumped. How awful life must have been for them in that moment if their best option in life was to jump from a 100-story plus building. But Robert, as you said, amidst all the horror, you saw people collecting each other and helping each other. I remember one of the people who fell, it was an older man who fell down. He said he was in his 60s. And when he fell down, 2 young kids, 2 like hip hoppers, were next to him. They picked him up, and the 3 of them ran together. And Robin, one final memory I have from that day. After the first tower fell, we made our way to an elementary school about 3 blocks away. And I remember talking to a New York City firefighter. He was so covered in ash, I couldn't tell his race. But he opened his eyes, and I could see these beautiful blue eyes. And I was asking him about what was going on. He said, can I talk to my wife? Can I tell my wife I love her? And then he went back into the dust, back to do his job.
Extraordinary. Byron Pitts, downtown at Ground Zero this morning. Byron, we'll be back with you as the morning goes on here. And that was the searing image of the day, the lives lost, the bravery and the courage for those who had no other choice but to jump. And Byron described the faces covered in the debris and the dust as they made their way out of Ground Zero to tell their loved ones that they had survived. The Pentagon, of course, was hit next. And we want to go to Martha Raddatz because she was working at the State Department. They were evacuated. And of course, so many then returned to the Pentagon the next day while it was still smoldering to get back to work. And you can see the flag that has been unfurled this morning. And Martha, you have covered what has happened in the 20 years since. And we have all been moved by the number of young people who were just babies, children on 9/11, who then went and defended our country, fought for our country in the years since.
Exactly, David. And so many joined the military. So many wanted to fight in these wars because of 9/11. They were inspired. They wanted to do something for their country. On that morning when I was at the State Department for ABC, I spent the day on Memorial Bridge, and all day long we were hearing reports that there was another plane headed for Washington. And of course, we were all watching what was happening in New York. And then that horror came to Washington, D.C. as well, right here to the Pentagon. But these people, as you said, David, they did not even leave the building that day. They were in the Army Operations Center, keeping track as best they could of what was going on. And then, of course, having to plan a war to see what could possibly be done so this never happened again. That flag that was unfurled this morning was so meaningful to me because the very next day after 9/11, after that plane hit that side of the Pentagon and 184 people were killed, they unfurled the flag. The firefighters here who were still pulling people out of the building on that evening unfurled the flag, and that stayed there until that section of the Pentagon was rebuilt. My husband was in the Pentagon that day. He's also a correspondent. So throughout that day when I was trying to report, I really had no idea whether he was okay. I kept reminding myself what a huge building this is, and of course he was okay. But we all juggled that day being professionals and also sharing this horrid experience for our country, also being scared Americans and joining together and trying to unify in any way we could.
Martha Raddatz at the Pentagon this morning. And Martha, I know the 3 of us here are grateful to you for all of your reporting in the 20 years since.
She is fearless.
Martha
Raddatz is fearless.
And Robin, Martha mentioned that there were so many, the firefighters, of course, taking the bodies out the next day. But in the interim, there were the survivors who counted on one another to get out of that building.
And it's so important. It's not just today. All week long here on ABC, we have been showing different perspectives And you both had specials last night that were riveting and compelling. And then on Wednesday on ABC, we aired a special 2020, The Women of 9/11. We heard moving, previously untold stories from women who were there impacted by the attack on the Twin Towers. We also heard from Colonel Marilyn Wills, who was at work at the Pentagon the morning of 9/11.
I knew there was a door that would lead out of our office to the exterior. And so I grabbed on the door and I
that a lot has already been made about the weather and the blue skies of that day and
seeing right now a field that is sacred ground. In fact, only the family members will be
see rain in the area where my office was. So that was my first thought. I'm going to that window because I can get out. And I start crawling. I crawled out the door that I walked in for the meeting. And as I was crawling out of the door, someone was holding on to the back of me. And I said, who are you? She said, it's Lois. Lois had to be late 60s, early 70s. So I told her, I got you. We're going to get out of here.
And that's what you heard over and over from people. I got you. I got you. Colonel Wells received 2 medals, including the Purple Heart. In fact, she was wearing it during the interview. After 9/11, she continued to serve in the military, actually going to Afghanistan. And she wanted to be there. And now she is retired school teacher, started in grade school and then going on to be a psychology instructor at a university. And that's what you find from the stories that we told all this week. It's not just where it happened 20 years ago. Where are they now? What are they doing now? And the sense of purpose that they all feel that they have.
How they rededicated to something central they believed in. And listening to her, I kept thinking of the amazing calm and bravery, the steadiness of so many people in the face of unimaginable terror. And you remember all of those voicemails, you remember the phone calls to loved ones, just to say, some of them, I want you to have a good life. Just remember to have a good life.
And so many of those phone calls, as we know, Diane, came from Flight 93 and the heroism, the courage on board, and they're difficult phone calls to hear 20 years later, but the families who cherish those calls and every word in those calls to that, it's still in a sense a gift for them to have a piece of their loved one.
And the ceremony there later will be a more intimate ceremony that we'll see here in New York. Because on 9/11, we learned heroes come in all forms, didn't we? And there's no better example than the men and women of United Airlines Flight 93, forever known as the Flight of Heroes. Passengers banding together to take back their plane, prevent another attack. Flight 93 crashing in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, what you're seeing right now, a field that is sacred ground. In fact, only the family members will be allowed there at that site. Juju Chang is in Shanksville for us this morning. Good morning, Juju.
Hey, good morning to you, Robin. You know, it was 10:03 a.m. on this day. It was about an hour and 20 minutes after that first plane hit the World Trade Center that Flight 93 crashed just beyond this grassy hill on the other side. It's now the final resting place of those brave men and women, the passengers and crew, all 40 of them, and their families. And frankly, the town of Shanksville has spent 20 years trying to make sure that their memory and their bravery is memorialized. Around the crash site, there is a set of beautiful monuments, including a 93-foot tower called the Tower of Voices, as David alluded to, those precious voices coming from the airplane. Inside, obviously 93 feet to represent Flight 93, but inside 40 wind chimes to represent the 40 voices. And we heard from dozens of the passengers and crew on board. They called their loved ones, and it was those phone calls that allowed them to understand what had happened to the other planes at the World Trade Center and at the Pentagon. We understood that they hatched a plan. They voted to fight back against the hijackers, rather. They decided that they would fight not just for their lives, but for their country. Their act of heroism was a supreme act of patriotism. And today, the families will take a really solemn walk onto the crash site. In fact, only the families are ever allowed to walk on those hallowed grounds. The families are going to be joined, of course, by performers and by dignitaries, including Vice President Kamala Harris, later President President Biden and former President George Bush, who, of course, was president at 9/11. And he's the one who, in response, declared the war on terror. But I'm telling you, there are many people here in Shanksville and beyond who believe that what happened on board Flight 93 was, in fact, the first battle on the global war on terror.
They were defending their country. There's no question, Juju. Our thanks to you, defending all that was right about humanity on board that flight. And Dina Burkett is her husband Tom was on board that flight, and he had called her a number of times from the plane. And she was a former flight attendant, and she said, "You know what, Tom? You need to sit down and not draw attention to yourself." And I asked her, in that moment, did you think? She said, "I knew that wasn't going to work. I knew my husband, and I could tell through the phone the bravery of the passengers on board that flight."
And also in your special, I heard from the flight attendant who was on board, and she was so calm in talking to her husband and saying, "Give my love to the family," but that you could just tell how she still was like on the job, so to speak, as a flight attendant, wanting to keep all of those around her calm as best she could, but to have that voice, to hear it.
I'm being hijacked. We're being hijacked, I believe, she said, yes. And still doing her job to make sure that the passengers had a face to turn to.
And you know, Diane, you and I have talked in recent days about the higher purpose of taking this moment 20 years later. And I know this is so important to you as well, Robin, that we come together and we try to find the simplest of ways to honor, to pay tribute. And Dina, who I mentioned, the wife who was talking to her husband on board that flight, she said something profound. When I sat down with these survivors and these families, I asked them a simple question toward the end of the interview. What do you hope from your fellow Americans? What do you hope from your country 20 years later? And here's what Dina said.
It's not just Tom's story. It is the story of every person on that flight coming together and serving the same purpose. And I think that is the strength that we draw from that story of Flight 93.
20 years later.
20 years later, 50 years later.
And the power to make a difference with our simple acts and words.
The power that lies within something so small as a smile, a kind word, caring, paying attention to someone, listening to someone, responding appropriately to someone. Just the small things that are expected of us that we can do, but sometimes don't do.
Perhaps we do that on this 20th anniversary.
The best way to honor them is to take time to think about what difference you can make. And don't just consider it. Do it. Smile. Look up. Pay attention to what's around you, who's around you, and what their needs are. And then fulfill it.
Powerful, right? Just smile. Just look up, she said.
Fulfill it. As she said, because sometimes we think it and we want to, and we have good intentions, but as she said, follow through.
Yeah.
Do it.
You know, and this notion of purpose, she talks about a simple smile or just making eye contact with someone. And then there are, of course, the young people.
Forever through his legacy and his actions. And of course, that is so true for so many, David. And I know that a lot has already been made about the weather and the blue skies of that day. And today, I just wanted to add that, you know, I've covered this anniversary over the years multiple times from down here at Ground Zero. And many times it was raining. And you just had these puddles of sorrow all around. And it seemed like it kind of met the mood of the mourners. And yet, at the same time, it also seems equally fitting and appropriate to have the sunshine on an otherwise gloomy occasion in some way to... At the same time, it also seems equally fitting and appropriate to have the sunshine on an otherwise gloomy occasion in some way to represent the light and the resilience of this city and the people, despite the best efforts of terrorists to try to extinguish that.
I just love that point, Lindsay. We can see over your shoulder the reflecting pools, the beauty, the power of those pools with the names etched in bronze. And one of the things that's so moving when you go down to those pools is the fact that not only are the names etched in bronze, but they're not alphabetical. They're actually grouped with the colleagues that they often sat next to in their offices, that they died with that day. And it's a way for Florence and so many others to come back and see the loved ones, the colleagues they've missed for 20 years, all grouped together along that pool. You know, Lindsay talked about the light, the sunshine this morning as we look forward, and nowhere is there more inspiration than from Diane's 20 years of reporting. And I love the words you used 20 years ago, and you use them again today. 63 tiny forces of nature in that room.
Reasons to hope in that room. Yes, we've been with these mothers. They were new wives, newlyweds, pregnant women who lose their husbands and then give birth. And we followed them and their children. I kept thinking, Lindsay was talking, that we had them do a mural, a kind of message to the world. And one of the young children said, you know, everyone seems to remember a different color blue in the sky that day. So they begin the mural with different colors of blue. But these children are so extraordinary, and as the babies grew, we did check in with them. We checked in when they were 2, when they were 5, when they were 10, and we were astonished to see, even 20 years after the attacks, they bring the fathers they never met into the room. I began to get an immediate answer to one of my questions from long ago. Would these babies who never met their fathers end up looking out through his eyes, smiling his smile?
Oh, shit.
The children showed us you can find ways to remember someone you never met.
It is so powerful, Diane, and what a gift. I was looking at social media last night. Robin and I were texting while these specials were on the air, and you should just know, I want you to know the impact your reporting for 20 years has had on millions of people. They were texting, Diane Sawyer has me crying, but tears of joy.
Well, these women and these children have taught us so much about resilience and how you take your doubts and your grief and transform it into some purpose and joy. And there's one of the young women, she's the daughter of a firefighter, who said to us, just remember that grief is a passage. And she loved so much what someone said to her, that the size of your grief is the size of your love.
That's so true. And Jack and Terrelyn, they're just
yes.
The mom and son, and there were so many that you profiled, but they really moved me in that she had taught him since he was a little boy how to find his father. She told him to close his eyes and to imagine.
Look inside his heart. Mm-hmm. And as a little boy, I love when she says, and where's your heart? And he points to his stomach. And you know, he was just filled with his father already, because she was not going to let him lose him too.
And we should think about that when we see these family members in just a few minutes that will be up there.
Yes.
And we'll be saying their loved ones' names. And just think about the stories that we've been sharing. And each one of them has their own. I mean, it didn't happen to everyone, but to know that it's each a personal story for each and every one of them. But that's what I'm going to think about when I hear those names. And I know we're going to be silent once those names are being read, as we should.
Right, but they each treasure
the families in Shanksville. Again, that moment will be only for family members and loved ones.
Into the city, each other's eyes. Just a feeling of being united, as the President Biden said in his speech, about how we're stronger for that. And this is a reminder. This is a reminder for all of us to just take a moment and pause and to be together in our remembrance, and just to know, as you alluded to, and Diane, you've said this, and you know my mother and father. My father was in the Tuskegee Airmen, served in 3 wars for this great country. We have more in common than not, so why don't we focus on those similarities and understand that the differences are there? Let's celebrate what brings us all together.
And the families and the children say, to pay tribute to those who are lost, find the common ground again. That's who we are. That's our bedrock. It's common ground.
And that's why we're here this morning. Let's listen.
Freedom!
Scottish.
Hola.
Hello.
Uh-oh. Look at this guy in armor.
Burma. I'm more watching this 5-hour documentary.
Yeah.
Clinton's looking.
I just, while you were doing that, I went and set up my deer blind in the backyard so I can get the deer that's back there eating apples. And get out there early and just head out there about 4 o'clock in the morning. It's coming in about 6:30.
The power of the voices of the children. The Young People's Chorus of New York with the Star-Spangled Banner. Approaching that moment of silence. The bagpipes. And of course, 8:46 a.m.
Oh, that's the actual flag. I didn't realize that's the actual flag from World Trade Center. They're holy. Holy shit, it's still around. Look at the holes and shit ripped in it from it. That's crazy. .846, look at that.
Moment of silence. The moment of silence we just shared marks the very moment 20 years ago that American Airlines Flight 11 flew into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. My name is Mike Lowe, and my daughter Sarah Elizabeth Lowe was a flight attendant on that plane. These 20 years have felt like both a long time and a short time, and as we recite the names of those we lost, my memory goes back to that terrible day when it felt like an evil specter had descended on our world. But it was also a time when many people acted above and beyond the ordinary. Beginning with the actions of the flight crews, like Sarah, and the passengers on the 4 flights, the individuals in the towers, the professionals of the fire and police, and later the volunteers who helped work on the file sensitive to recovering our loved ones' remains. They helped pull us through the darkest days of our lives. In the last 20 years, my family and I have at times known unbearable sorrow and disbelief about the lives that would never be. Years we have filled with speaking out on my daughter's behalf, calling on many more precautions, and also for the history to be remembered, not as numbers and a date, but the faces of ordinary people, people who looked a lot like Sarah. At the first memorial ceremony, my wife Bobby and I stood here with thousands of family members, right in the midst of a gray and black world of destroyed buildings. Today, this is a quiet place of memory. The gleaming 9/11 Museum holds a sacred repository for our loved ones' remains.
Yeah, man.
The
video they got viewed inside,
of
man,
all the
that's like
sons and
crazy,
daughters,
the new one.
the siblings,
Beautiful.
husbands and wives, grandparents and friends. As we carry these 20 years forward, I find sustenance in a continuing appreciation for all of those who rose to be more than ordinary people, and a father's pride in his daughter's selfless acts in the last moments of her life, acting with heroic calm to help those in the air and those on the ground. A legacy from Sarah that burns like a...
What are you doing? Shut up!
Gordon M. Ameth Jr. Elmiro Abad. Marie Rose Abad. Andrew Anthony Abate. Vincent Paul Abate. Lawrence Christopher Abel. Alana Abraham. William F. Abrahamson. Richard Anthony Achetto. Heinrich Bernard Ackerman. Paul Aquaviva. Christian Adams. Donald Leroy Adams. Patrick Adams.
Oh, let's show pictures of him.
Lewis Adams. Stephen George Adams. Ignatius Udo Adanga. Christy A. Adamo. Terrence Edward Adderley Jr. Sophia B. Otto. Lee Adler. Daniel Thomas Aflito. Emmanuel Akwazi Afwakwa. Alok Agarwal. Mukul Kumar Agarwala. Joseph Agnello. David Scott Agnes. Joao Alberto da Aguiar Jr. Brian G.
Those are some crazy names out there.
Jeremiah Joseph Ahern. Joanne Marie Aladiotis. Sabir Ahmed. Terrence Andre Aiken.
They killed some of their own people.
O. Ajala. Trudy M. Alagero. Andrew Alameno. Margaret
Okay, they're gonna do this for
Alaria.
I'll see you in my dream.
Martesh. From the pictures, action for me, a way to Durienzo. That's old.
Yeah, look at all those names. Okay, here we go. Fast forward. Okay, do the moment of silence from there. Oh, 9:59 a.m. Moment of silence. South Tower collapse. Oh, I see what they did. That was from the North Tower, the names. There's South Tower. Okay. Yeah, the black guy and Asian. Asian on keyboard, black guy playing piano, violin. Get it, buddy. Get it. Wow. Good job, man.
Randall Gooseby on violin, stunning performance with the blue skies and the reflecting pools at Ground Zero. We are approaching 10:03, the fifth moment of silence to mark Flight 93 and that moment in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. The bravery.
10:03. The one that was going for White House. But the people actually crashed it.
My dad, Donald Freeman.
Back to names again.
Carol and Fly.
Names after names.
Her sister.
After name.
Ronnie Lee. Raoul H.
What the hell? I didn't mean to go back that far.
Elizabeth Fox. Pauline Francis. Virgin Lucy Francis.
Ah, look at that. All those names.
J. Frank. Morton H. Frank. Pierre Christopher Frank. Colleen L. Fraser. Richard K. Fraser. Kevin J. Frawley. Clyde Fraser Jr. Lillian Inez Frederick. Andrew Fredericks. Tamitha Freeman. Brett Owen Freeman. Peter L. Freund. Arlene Eva Fry. Alan W. Friedlander. And my uncle Jason Romano Travis. We love you and we miss you. Thank you for being our guardian angel. And my hero and my guardian angel, my uncle, Lieutenant Jeffrey P. Walls, FDNY, Ladder 9, Great Jones Street. Although I never got the privilege to meet you, so many people tell me that I remind them of you in so many ways, and I'm so honored to have your name as my middle name. We love and miss you dearly.
Andrew Keith Friedman.
J. Friedman.
Greg J. Froner.
Lisa Ann Frost.
Christian Fry.
I'll have to go down there and check the memorial.
Fumando.
Stephen Elliott Furman.
Paul James Fermato.
Carlton Douglas Bay Fife.
Frederick Neil Gabler.
Richard Peter Gabriel.
Richard Gabriel.
James Andrew Gadiel.
Pamela Lee Gaff.
Irvin Vincent Galliard.
Deanna Lynn Galante.
Grace Catherine Galante.
Anthony Edward Gallagher.
Daniel James Gallagher.
John Patrick Gallagher.
Lawrence J. Galletti.
Ono E. Gallo.
Vincent Galucci.
Thomas E. Galvin.
Giovanna Galetta Gambali.
Thomas Gambino Jr.
Gian F. Gamboa.
Ronald L. Gamboa.
Peter James Gansky Jr.
Michael Gann.
Charles William Garbarini.
Andrew Sonny Garcia.
Caesar R. Garcia.
David Garcia.
Jorge Luis Moron Garcia.
Juan Garcia.
Marilyn Del Carmen Garcia.
Christopher Samuel Gardner.
Douglas Benjamin Gardner.
Harvey Joseph Gardner III.
And my cousin, victim of the 93 bombing, Johnny Boy DiGiovanni. We love you. We miss you very much. Hope to see you one day.
My grandfather, Rick Knott Jaggernaut. We love you and we miss you. We live on through all your children and all your grandchildren.
Gertzberg.
Susan M. Gitzendonner.
Lawrence T. Getzfred.
James G. Geyer.
Cortez Gee.
Joseph M. Giacone.
Vincent Francis Giamona.
Deborah Lynn Gibbon.
James Andrew Giberson.
Brenda C.
that's cool.
Gibson.
Craig Neil Gibson.
Ronnie E. Geese.
Andrew Clive Gilbert.
And to my cousin, Janine Nicole Gonzalez, the thing I remember the most about you is your smile. The illustrious light of that smile continues to guide our family every single day. I ask that every single one of us here call upon the strength of our loved ones to help navigate us through tough times and rough roads. May we find the love to connect us and weed out all that divides us. And most importantly, we never forget.
My brother, Jimmy Ostrowski. Jimmy O. Jimmy, we miss you. Your kind blue eyes, your dimples, your sense of humor, but most importantly, your warm and caring ways that left a loving footprint in all of our hearts.
Your cousins, your best friends, and me. We live every day with enthusiasm and gratitude as you would have wanted.
Wilder Alfredo Gomez.
Janine Nicole Gonzalez.
Mauricio Gonzalez.
Rosa J. Gonzalez.
Lynn Catherine Goodchild.
Calvin Joseph Gooding.
Peter Morgan Goodrich.
Harry Gooding.
Kieran.
A lot you gotta be.
For everyone who's here, I
What's
say
that?
blessing to each and every one of us. And I just ask that we love and be kind to one another. God protect our country.
And my uncle, Paul Frederick Biatini. Uncle Paul, we love and miss you every day. Your memory and legacy is carried on by your amazing daughters.
Mark Gulivari.
Gary Robert Haig,
Andrea Lynn Haberman,
Barbara Mary Habib,
Philip Hensler,
Nizam A. Hafiz,
Karen Elizabeth Haggerty,
Stephen Michael Haggis,
Mary Lou Page,
Lieutenant David Halperman,
Basilios G. Paramis,
James A. Harlan,
Gerald Francis,
dynamic personality.
Lucio Dario Hidalgo Cedeno,
Timothy Brian Higgins,
Robert D.W. Higley II,
Todd Russell Hill,
Clara Victorine Hines,
Neil O. Hines,
Mark Hindy,
Katsuyuki Hirai,
Heather Malia Ho,
Tara Yvette Hobbs,
Thomas Anderson Hobbs,
James
Okay, you
J.
can see the
Colby,
married couple, wife and
Robert
husband.
Wayne
every-
Hobson III,
Holy shit.
Dewan Hodges,
Ronald G. Horner,
Patrick A. Hoey,
John A. Hoffer,
Marcia Hoffman,
Stephen Gerard Hoffman,
Frederick Joseph Hoffman,
My whole
Michelle
family.
L. Hoffman,
Yeah, entire family.
Judith Florence Hoffmiller,
The entire family
Thomas
was killed right
Anderson
there.
Hobbs,
Husband,
Yeah.
wife, daughter.
Ray Hoban,
Robert Wayne Hobson III,
Oh,
Dewan Hodges,
Ronald G. Horner,
Patrick A. Hoey,
John A. Hoffer,
Marcia Hoffman,
Stephen Gerard Hoffman,
Frederick Joseph Hoffman,
Michelle L. Hoffman,
Judith Florence
husband, wife, son, and daughter.
Wallace
entire
Cole
family wiped out.
Hogan Jr.,
Thomas Warren Holweck Jr.,
Jonathan R. Homan,
Cora Hidalgo Holland,
John Holland,
Joseph F. Holland,
Jimmy I. Holly,
Yeah, a whole nother family.
Holmes,
Thomas P. Houlihan,
Herbert Wilson Homer,
Leroy W. Homer
God
Jr.,
damn.
Bradley V. Horn,
James P. Hopper,
and my brother, Brian Joseph Murphy. We miss you terribly. Love you forever. Your girls are excellent. It's a pleasure to see them move to a life of helping others.
and my deeply loved and dearly missed uncle, Christopher Newton Carter. We will never forget you. Montgomery McCullough,
Michael Joseph Horn,
Matthew Douglas Horning,
Robert L. Orojo Jr.,
Michael Robert Horrocks,
Aaron Horowitz,
Charles J. Houston,
Ahuru G. Houston,
Angela M. Howes,
George Gerard Howard,
Brady K. Howell,
Michael C. Howell,
Stephen Leon Howell,
Jennifer L. Howell,
Milagros Romita,
Marion R. Meacham,
Stephen Hutchko Jr.,
Chris Robert Hughes,
Paul Rexter Hughes,
Robert T. Hughes Jr.,
Thomas F. Hughes Jr.,
Timothy Robert Hughes,
Susie Huey,
Lamar Demetrius Holsey,
John Nicholas Humber Jr.,
William Christopher Hunt,
Kathleen Ann Hunt Casey,
Joseph Gerard Hunter,
Peggy M. Hurt,
Robert R. Fusa,
Stephen N. Highland Jr.,
Robert J. Heimel,
Thomas Edward Hines.
Walter Gene Hines,
Joseph Anthony Ionelli.
Zudu Ibis,
Jonathan Lee Yelpy.
William Patrick Eichen,
Daniel Ilkaneyev.
Frederick L. J. L. Jr.,
And my wonderful father, Ian Thompson, you were a light for all of us, and you are so very missed. Even after 20 years, it feels surreal, and it's a difficult but beautiful thing to be here to honor you. Love you, Dad.
and my brother, firefighter Paul Hanlon Keating, ladder 5. Totally, the family can't believe it's been 20 years. We miss you, and we miss you just as much today as we did 20 years ago. Until then, may God hold you in his hands.
Abraham Nathaniel Ilowitz.
Anthony P. Infante Jr.,
Louis S. Inglaterra.
Christopher Noble Ingracia,
Paul Inella.
Third, Brian Leander Jones.
Charles Edward Jones.
Christopher D. Jones.
Donald T. Jones II.
Donald W. Jones.
Judith Lauter Jones.
Linda Jones.
Mary S. Jones.
Andrew Brian Jordan Sr.
Robert Thomas Jordan.
Albert Gunness Joseph.
Ingeborg Joseph.
Carl Henry Joseph.
Stephen Joseph.
Jane
Wow.
Jane Josiah.
Anthony
Another pretty much whole family, dude.
L.
Yeah.
Warbe Jr.
Fucking just
Karen
insane, man.
Sue Jude.
How much it wiped people off,
And
like entire
the
family heads.
Judge.
Michael F. Judge.
Paul William Jurgens.
Thomas Edward Jurgens.
Shashikaran Lakshmita Kadaba.
Gavharoy Komardinova.
Shari
Russians?
Kandel.
Killed a couple Russians there.
And my cousin, Brian. My cousin, Brian Christopher Hickey, FDNY Battalion Chief from Rescue 4. So very brave, so very missed, so very loved by so many, always.
And my father, Louis F. Eversano Jr. To my daddy and all of those that we lost 20 years ago today. Your loss has left us all with a heartache that nothing will ever heal. But know this, our love for you and our memories of you and with you are something that no one and nothing, no evil, will ever steal. God bless America. Howard Lee King.
Jennifer Lee Lynn Kane.
Vincent D. King.
To pay tribute and get the names. And there you see them at the bottom of your screen. We also are watching Shanksville on the right, where former President George W. Bush
Kaplan.
is about to speak to the families who are gathered there. Of course, he was president when the 11 attacks happened. He spent hours in Air Force One in the pile after 9/11. Joined by former First Lady Laura Bush there in Shanksville. Of course, that image of the president in a classroom in Florida with those children, a reading event. Andy Card whispered into his ear a second America is under attack. And the look on President Bush's face, it really said it all.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, I'll never forget that. Every time I see that, I'm like, yeah, you see Bush is panicking.
Hoping to inspire America to stand together in the
He
face of
wasn't a
such
panic.
evil.
Do what?
And we remember those words.
The moment that Bush got told that we're under attack, because the first the guy told him, is like, hey, there's a plane that hit one of the World Trade Center towers. Well, they thought it was just like a little Cessna, and it's like Bush was thinking, oh, well, fuck, it sucks that someone had a heart attack. That's hopefully everyone's all right. But then he comes back with his, no, President, second plane hit the other tower. We're under attack. And then Bush, when he was in that school with the kids doing that support thing, fucking just that panic look in Bush's face, like, holy fuck. Like, and he's trying to keep his composure, not to freak the kids, freak everyone out, you know? That,
yeah,
we're at war, fucking, was like, oh, so real, like, oh, shit. Was, every time I see that, like, yeah, you can see him panicking. He did a good job keeping his shit together.
Yeah. Lower Manhattan.
Does everybody want to impeach him too?
What's that?
You said everybody wanted to try to catch you. I don't know why.
Vice President Kamala Harris. She'll speak a short time from now. But let's listen to former President George W. Bush.
Anyways, what I was saying is everybody wanted to impeach George W. Bush for whatever reason.
He had a shitty hand dealt to him, that's all. We knew it was coming. We knew something was impending years and years before Bush was president. Fucking back in the mid-90s when they first bombed the Trade Center, they knew that, and the jihadis were already even warned America that something big is, we're planning some big attack on him. Well, no one knew what it was. That's what the problem was, that not knowing what their plans were, and that was, and it evolved. They knew it was coming. It's just how we'd plan for something we don't know. And that was kind of...
Yeah.
There it is. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Laura and I are honored to be with you. Madam Vice President, Vice President Cheney, Governor Wolf, Secretary Holland, and distinguished guests. 20 years ago, we all found in different ways, in different places, but all at the same moment, that our lives would be changed forever. The world was loud with carnage and sirens, and then quiet with missing voices that would never be heard again. These lives remain precious to our country and infinitely precious to many of you. Today we remember your loss, we share your sorrow, and we honor the men and women you have loved so long and so well. For those too young to recall that clear September day,
oh yeah, I remember.
It is hard to describe the mix of feelings we experienced. There was horror at the scale of destruction, and awe at the bravery and kindness that rose to meet it. There was shock at the audacity of evil, and gratitude for the heroism and decency that opposed it. In the sacrifice of the first responders, in the mutual aid of strangers, in the solidarity of grief and grace, the actions of an enemy revealed the spirit of a people, and we were proud of our wounded nation. In these memories, the passengers and crew of Flight 93 must always have an honored place. Here, the intended
they're going
targets
for the White
became
House.
the instruments of rescue.
Flight
Many
93.
who are now alive
Yeah, Flight 93 was going for the White House.
Debt to the defiance displayed
But they were
in the skies above this field.
the people were ballsy enough
It would be
to
a
take the plane
mistake to
down.
idealize the experience of those
Fuck
terrible
you.
events. All that
up.
many people could
Do what you
initially
do.
see
I
was
think
the
I
brute
already am.
randomness of death. All that many could feel was unearned suffering. All that many could hear was God's terrible silence. There are many who still struggle with a lonely pain that cuts deep within. In those fateful hours, we learned other lessons as well. We saw that Americans were vulnerable, but not fragile. That they possess a core of strength that survives the worst that life can bring. We learned that bravery is more common than we imagined, emerging with sudden splendor in the face of death. We vividly felt how every hour with our loved ones was a temporary and holy gift. And we found that even the longest days end. Many of us have tried to make spiritual sense of these events. There is no simple explanation for the mix of providence and human will that sets the direction of our lives. But comfort can come from a different sort of knowledge. After wandering long and lost in the dark, many have found they were actually walking step by step toward grace. As a nation, our adjustments have been profound. Many Americans struggled to understand why an enemy would hate us with such zeal. The security measures incorporated into our lives are both sources of comfort and reminders of our vulnerability. And we have seen growing evidence that the dangers to our country can come not only across borders, but from violence that gathers within.
Mm-hmm.
There is little cultural overlap between violent extremists
the oath,
abroad
man.
and violent extremists
Fight
at home.
Fight enemies, foreign and
But in their
domestic.
disdainful pluralism,
Domestic.
in their disregard for human life, in their determination to defile national symbols, they are children of the same foul spirit, and it is our continuing duty to confront them. After 9/11, millions of brave Americans stepped forward and volunteered to serve in the armed forces.
Our brother.
The military measures taken over the last 20 years to pursue dangers at their source have led to debate. But one thing is certain. We owe an assurance to all who have fought our nation's most recent battles. Let me speak directly to veterans and people in uniform. The cause you pursued at the call of duty is the noblest America has to offer. You have shielded your fellow citizens from danger. You have defended the beliefs of your country and advanced the rights of the downtrodden. You have been the face of hope and mercy in dark places. You have been a force for good in the world. Nothing that has followed, nothing, can tarnish your honor or diminish your accomplishments. To you and to the honored dead,
so awesome.
Our country is forever grateful.
To the soldiers. Evan Bush, I agree with you, buddy. Soldiers did a
In the
great
weeks
job.
and months following the 9/11 attacks, I was proud to lead an amazing, resilient, united people.
What they could do.
When it comes to the unity of America, those days seem distant from our own. Malign force seems at work in our common life that turns every disagreement into an argument and every argument into a clash of cultures. So much of our politics has become a naked appeal to anger, fear, and resentment. That leaves us worried about our nation and our future together. I come without explanations or solutions. I can only tell you what I've seen. On America's day of trial and grief, I saw millions of people instinctively grab for a neighbor's hand and rally to the cause of one another. That is the America I know.
Yep. At
a time when religious bigotry might have flowed freely, I saw Americans reject prejudice and embrace people of Muslim faith.
Yep.
That is the nation I know.
Yep. It don't matter what religion you are. Human's human, man.
At a time when nativism could have stirred hatred and violence against people perceived as outsiders, I saw Americans reaffirm their welcome to immigrants and refugees. That is the nation I know. At a time when some viewed the rising generation as individualistic and decadent, I saw young people embrace an ethic of service and rise to selfless action. That is the nation I know. This is not mere nostalgia. It is the truest version of ourselves. It is what we have been and what we can be again.
Yeah.
20 years ago, terrorists chose a random group of Americans on a routine flight to be collateral damage in a spectacular act of terror.
Yes, it was.
The 33 passengers and 7 crew of Flight 93 could have been any group of citizens selected by fate. In a sense, they stood in for us all.
Yeah.
The terrorists soon discovered that a random group of Americans is an exceptional group of people facing an impossible circumstance.
Yeah, we're taking this plane down, you fuck.
They comforted their loved ones by phone.
In the field.
Braced each other for action and defeated the designs of evil. These Americans were brave, strong, and united in ways that shocked the terrorists.
Yep.
Which should not surprise any of us. This is the nation we know.
And it's pretty dang courageous of those guys did to take that plane down.
And whenever we need hope,
why did the other 2 planes get taken?
We can look to the skies and remember. God bless.
Former President George W. Bush in Shanksville, talking about the.
I know if I was on a plane that's getting hijacked, I would put my life on the line to make that motherfucker
also
take it.
warned about hate from within.
Oh yeah.
In 2021, he said, "I remember a time when people instinctively."
I would literally put my life on the line to save all the on that plane.
Americas.
Or take the plane down and save
speech from the former
others.
president who presided over those very difficult days
several times
20 years ago.
We are delighted.
And he also honored the veterans who have fought over the course of 20 years following 9/11. He spoke to their families and spoke to the young people who were inspired by the events of that day to do something for their country.
To Paul and Melina Murdoch.
We're going to stay with Shanksville now. We expect to hear from Vice President Kamala Harris shortly.
The memorial that has
a performance to follow the president here, and you can see the gathering.
Thank you.
A little more
Good
tighter
morning.
here.
Good morning.
Oh, dear.
Told us that the future.
Also, the hope that Americans, our fellow Americans, might be inspired to help encourage one another to be our best selves. Vice President Dick Cheney there with Liz. He's leaving Shanksville.
Our ambassador.
There, of course, with the former President George W. Bush, as their administration presided over the darkest days in U.S. history. But I think the former president and the current vice president will both be applauded for their words on unity today.
And it was so fitting that you had, because we're not making it about politics, but people try to do that, but then you had George W. Bush, you had Kamala Harris, 2 different parties.
Who helped many of the people down on that horrible day. Lucas has your sweet personality. Ashlyn is strong. Daryl LaRon McKinney. George Patrick McLaughlin Jr. And my beloved late husband, Sean Gordon Corbett O'Neill. Beautiful Sean, you are always with us through the eyes of your incredible daughter and all around us, forever and eternal. And to my cousin and my best friend, Lucia Pifasi, Lucy, it's been 20 years today that you are gone, but this year's will never.
I know they put up a wall. Oh, this is a 93. Oh.
We love you.
All the
and
people on the
please give
airplane.
Dad a hug for us. God bless.
That's the wall, memorial wall.
Daryl LaRon McKinney, George Patrick McLaughlin Jr., and my beloved late husband, Sean Gordon Corbett O'Neill. Beautiful Sean, you are always with us through the eyes of your incredible daughter and all around us, forever and eternal.
Yeah, these two neck girls are hot. Hot shit.
And to my cousin and my best friend, Lucia Crifasi. Lucy, it's been 20 years today that you are gone, but this year's will never erase the memories we shared. You are a special friend I ever had, who cannot be replaced.
I'm gonna go take a shower, but I'll be back.
But your
Yeah, I
happy
need to do that too.
memories are still with us. I am glad I am still in touch with your sister Maria, your brother Frank, and our best friends Nadine, Betsy, and Lily Wilson. I love you, and I really, really miss you. Ciao, Bella.
Like that
Oh my God.
Great is of thee, the liberty I see. My fathers died, land of the pilgrim's bride, from every mountain side. That freedom.
Now, the families of Flight 93 are invited to the Wall of Names and the sacred ground for a private wreath-laying ceremony. Thank you for attending today's service.
We love you, and please give Dad a hug for us. God bless you all, and God bless America.
And my grandfather, Battalion Chief Lawrence T. Stack. 20 years ago, I met my grandfather, BC Lawrence T. Stack. He held me in his arms, his first of 6 grandchildren. 7 days later, he was gone from the city and family he loved. We will love and miss you forever. Never forget 9/11 and the first responders who protect our city every day. We thank our military and our first responders to our country, and God bless America. Thank you.
Don't leave the bodies up there too long.
Deborah Merrick.
Raymond Joseph Metzger.
Damn, what?
And my younger brother, Michael.
Franklin Allen Pership, Danny Pesci, Michael John Peshreen, Davin N. Peterson, Donald Arthur Peterson, Jean Hoadley Peterson, William Russell Peterson, Mark James Petrocelli, Philip Scott Petty, Glenn Karen Pettit, Dominic A. Pizzulo, Kayleen Elizabeth Pizzuti, Kevin J. Pfeiffer, Tudor Bond, Kenneth John Phelan Sr., Snay Ann Phillip, Pena McCann Piantieri, Ludwig John Picaro, Matthew Picerno, Joseph O. Pick, Christopher J. Pickford, Dennis J. Pierce, Bernard Petronico, Nicholas P. Pietrunti, and my loving father, John Scharf. Thank you for watching over me, your family, and your future grandchild. We miss you and we love you. And my uncle, Brent James Woodall.
Theodoros Higgins,
Susan Elizabeth Pinto,
Joseph Piscadlo,
Christopher Todd Pittman,
Joshua Michael Hiver,
Robert R. Plager III,
Sandra F. Glazier,
Joseph Lamatalo,
John M. Pocher,
William Howard Pullman,
Lawrence Michael Polich,
Thomas H. Polhamus,
Steve Policino,
Susan M. Polio,
Darren H. Pontel,
Joshua Ayusa Popteen,
Giovanna Horace,
Anthony Portillo,
James Edward Patorti,
Daphne Pilatus,
Richard N. Polis,
Stephen Emmanuel Poulis,
Brandon Jerome Howell,
Scott Allen Powell,
Sean Edward Powell,
Antonio Dorsey Pratt,
Gregory M. Preziosi,
Wanda Evelise Prince,
Vincent A. Princiota,
Kevin M. Pryor,
Everett Martin Proctor III,
Carrie Beth Prosian,
David Lee Kroon,
Richard A. Prunty,
John Foster Puckett,
Robert David Pugliese,
Edward F. Pullis,
Patricia Ann Puma,
Jack D. Punches,
Hemeth Kumar Putor,
and my husband Patrick Sean Murphy. We will continue to live your legacy of love, good humor, and generosity. Thank you to my family and friends who've loved and supported me, Maggie, and Sean for the past 20 years. And thank you to our brave men and women in uniform for your courageous service and sacrifice. You are our real heroes. Thank you.
and my brother, Bart Joseph Ruggieri. I speak for all of us who knew and loved Bart when I say that 32 years was not enough and 20 years feels like yesterday. We remain forever inspired by his spirit, embodied in his favorite quote, "Life is not measured by the numbers of breaths you take, but by the moments that take your breath away." And a heartfelt thank you from all of us to our amazing first responders and our brave military service men and women who have kept the rest of us safe from terror on our homeland these past 20 years. May God bless you all.
Joseph J. Parcier Jr.,
Edward R. Pycon,
Christopher Quackenbush,
Lars Peter Quailben,
Lincoln Quapp,
Beth Ann Quigley,
Patrick J. Quigley IV,
Michael T. Quilty,
James Francis Quinn,
Ricardo J. Quinn,
Carol Millicent Rabelais,
Christopher Peter Anthony Racaniello,
Leonard J. Reglia,
Eugene J. Ruggiero, right.
Laura Marie Raganisi,
Michael Paul Ragusa,
Peter Frank Ramundi,
Harry A. Rains,
Lisa J. Rains,
Atism Raja,
Valsa Raja,
Edward J. Rail,
Lucas Rambusic,
Maria Ramses,
Harry Ramsons,
Vishnu Ramsarup,
Deborah A. Ramsar,
Lorenzo E. Ramsey,
Alfred Todd Ranke,
Adam David Rand,
Jonathan C. Randall,
Sharius S. Rangnicki,
Ann T. Ransom,
Fiona Rappaport,
Rhonda Sue Ram Eason,
Robert A. Rasmussen,
Amia Razul,
R. Mark Russwheeler,
Marcia D. Ratchford,
David Allen James Rathke,
and for my grandfather, Michael Sam Phillip, who I was never able to meet, but I'm pretty sure we would have had a lot of fun together.
and my brother, Dennis Gerard Taramina Jr., and his brother-in-law, Thomas V. Lenahan Jr. Thomas, we love you and miss you every day. The memories of the Flash comic books, Dennis, the Hotel California song, just all the memories. To quote my brother Phil, keep the Sam Adams on ice until we meet again. Dennis and Tom, this is for you.
William Ralph Robb, Gerard F. Rousey, Alexei Razuviev, Gregory Rita, Sarah Ann Redheffer, Michelle Marie Reed, Judith Ann Reese, Donald J. Regan, Robert M. Regan, Thomas Michael Regan, Christian Michael Otto Regenhard, Howard Reich, Craig Reedy, James Ryan Riley, Kevin O. Riley, Timothy R. Riley, Joseph Reyna Jr., Thomas Barnes Reinig, Frank Bennett Reisman, Joshua Scott Reese, Karen Renda, John Armand Rio, Richard Cyril Rescorla, John Thomas Resta, Sylvia Sanpio Resta, Martha M. Reski, David E. Reddick, Todd H. Rubin, Luis Clodoaldo Revilla Mir, Eduviges Reyes Jr., Bruce Albert Reynolds, John Frederick Rhodes, Francis Severio Riccardelli, Rudolph N. Riccio, Anne Marie Riccoboni, David Harlow Rice, Eileen Mary Rice, Kenneth Frederick Rice III, Cecilia E. Richard, Vernon Allen Richard, and my father, Port Authority Police Officer Paul Lazinski. We miss you. We love you. Amy and I know that your grandchildren, Samantha, Jack, Lily, and Daphne, are all in the arms of an angel. God bless America. God bless our law enforcement. And my husband, Stephen Goldstein. Steve, I still see your face every single day when I look at Hannah and Harris. They are the living representation of all that was good in you. We miss you and we love you.
My arm. I go now? Floyd Daniel Richards.
Gregory David Richards.
Michael Richards.
Vanessa Orencia Richards.
Firefighter Jimmy Ritchie's.
Alan J. Richmond.
John M. Rigo.
Frederick Charles Ramelli III.
Rose Mary Riso.
Moises N. Rivas.
Joseph R. Ravelli Jr.
Carmen Alicia Rivera.
Isaias Rivera.
Juan William Rivera.
Linda Evelise Rivera.
David E. Rivers.
Joseph R. Reverso.
Paul V. Ritza.
John Frank Rizzo.
Stephen Louis Roche.
Joseph Roberto.
Leo Arthur Roberts.
Michael E. Roberts.
Michael Edward Roberts.
Donald Walter Robertson Jr.
Jeffrey Robinson.
Michelle Lee Jean Robotham.
Donald Arthur Robson.
Antonio A. Rocha.
Raymond James Rocha.
Laura Rockefeller.
John Michael Rodock.
Antonio Jose Rodriguez.
Anthony Rodriguez.
Carmen Milagros Rodriguez.
Gregory E. Rodriguez.
Marsha A. Rodriguez.
Myra Valdez Rodriguez.
Richard Rodriguez.
David Bartolo Rodriguez Vargas.
And my brother, firefighter Gregory Thomas Saucedo, Ladder Company 5. Greg, we lived together 31 years. I didn't go more than 20 days without seeing each other. I love and I miss you. Can't believe it's 20 years.
And my uncle and godfather, Richard Joseph Cadena. You are missed by all, loved by everyone, and your memories are what keep us laughing, believing, and living as if we were to live 100 years but die tomorrow. Keep showing us signs. We need them always. We love and miss you. God bless America.
Matthew Rogan.
Jean Destrahan Roger.
Carly Rogers.
Scott William Roner.
Keith Michael Roma.
Joseph M. Romanaglo.
Efrain Romero Sr.
Elvin Romero.
James A. Romito.
Sean Paul Rooney.
Eric Thomas Roberto.
Aida Rosario.
Angela Rosario.
Mark H. Rosen.
Brooke David Rosenbaum.
Linda Rosenbaum.
Cheryl Lynn Rosenbaum.
Lloyd Daniel Rosenberg.
Mark Louis Rosenberg.
Andrew Ira Rosenblum.
Joshua M. Rosenblum.
Joshua Allen Rosenthal.
Richard David Rosenthal.
Philip Martin Rosenweig.
Danielle Rossetti.
Richard Barry Ross.
Norman S. Rossino.
Nicholas P. Rosamondo,
Michael Craig Rodberg,
Donna Marie Rothenberg,
Mark David Rothenberg,
James Michael Rowe,
Nicholas Charles Alexander Rowe,
Edward V. Rowenhorst,
Judy Roulette,
Timothy Allen Roy Sr.,
Paul G. Rubeck,
Ronald J. Rubin,
Joanne Rubino,
David M. Ruddle,
and my lovely mother, Griselda E. Guerrero James. I miss you every day, and I wish you were here to meet your grandchildren. We miss you.
and my beloved and elegant father, Gerald Michael Alcott. You are missed and loved beyond words. Your legacy continues on through your children and your 8 grandchildren until we meet again. May God bless America. May freedom reign, and may peace be with you all.
Bart Joseph Rougier,
Susan A. Ruggiero,
Adam Keith Bualter,
Gilbert Ruiz,
Robert E. Russell,
Stephen P. Russell,
Stephen Harris Russell,
Michael Thomas Russo Sr.,
Wade Allen Russo,
William R. Ruth,
Edward Ryan,
John Joseph Ryan,
Jonathan Stephen Ryan,
Matthew L. Ryan,
Tatiana Rishova,
Christina Sunga Ryuk,
Terry Sada,
Jason Alazar Sabag,
Thomas E. Sabella,
Scott H. Saber,
Charles E. Sabin Sr.,
Joseph Francis Sacerdote,
Jessica Lee Sachs,
Francis John Seducha,
Jude Elias Safi,
Brock Joel Safranoff,
Edward Saya,
John Patrick Salamone,
Marjorie C. Salama,
Hernando Rafael Salas,
Juan G. Salas,
Esmerlin Antonio Salcedo,
John Pepe Salerno,
Rama Sally and her unborn child,
Richard L. Salinardi Jr.,
Wayne John Salomon,
Norbert Salomon,
Catherine Patricia Salter,
Frank G. Salvatierra,
Paul Richard Salvio,
and my aunt Gavkarai Kamardinova. Not a day goes by without you being missed and loved. I've never gotten to meet you, but I'm sure we would have gotten along so well with you as my aunt. You have gone too soon, but the memory of you will forever be in our hearts.
and my husband, Michael Joseph Sinzi. Your family and friends love you and miss you. Your mom is now reunited with you. Please continue to watch over our 20-year-old son, D. Michael. He is just like you in many ways. He is amazing. Love you, and God bless America.
Samuel Robert Salvo Jr.,
Carlos Alberto Samaniego,
John P. Sammartino,
James Kenneth Samuel Jr.,
Michael San Philip,
Hugo M. Sane,
Alva Cynthia Jeffries Sanchez,
Jacqueline Patrice Sanchez,
Jesus Sanchez,
Raymond Sanchez,
Eric M. Sands,
Stacy Leigh Sanders,
Herman S. Sandler.
Jim Sanders Jr.,
Aileen J. Santiago.
Kirsten Reese Santiago,
Maria Teresa Concepcion Santillan.
Susan Gail Santo,
Christopher A. Santora.
John August Santor,
Mario L. Santoro.
Rafael Humberto Santos,
Rufino C. F. Santos III.
Victor J. Saraceni,
Kalyan K. Zakar.
Chappelle Renee Stewart Sarker,
Paul F. Sarl.
Deepika Kumar Satalore,
Gregory Thomas Cicedo.
Susan M. Sauer,
Anthony Savas.
Vladimir Savakin,
John Michael Scarborough.
David M. Scales,
Robert Louis Scandol.
Michelle Scarapita,
Dennis Scalzo.
John Albert Shart,
John G. Scharf.
said Fred C. Sheffield Jr.,
Angela Susan Scheinberg.
Scott Mitchell Schertzer,
Sean Shelkey.
Stephen Francis Schlag,
Robert A. Schlegel.
John Schissel,
Karen Helene Schmidt.
Ian Schneider,
Thomas G. Scholes.
Frank G. Schott Jr.,
Gerard Patrick Schrang.
Jeffrey H. Schreier,
John T. Schroeder.
Susan Lee Laspa Schuler,
Edward W. Shunk.
Mark Evan Schermeyer,
John Burkhard Schwartz.
Mark Schwartz,
Adrian Victoria Civetta.
Raphael Storka,
And my father, Angel Penna.
and my father, Arthur Warren Scullin, Vietnam veteran, Seabees Da Nang, Executive Tax Director, Marcia McClellan, member of the Ancient Order of Hibernians, whose 18 members were lost on September 11th, proud son, loving husband, proud father, uncle, and cousin, defender of the faith, and good friend. And on this day, as I said to my loving son Ethan and Maureen last night, do not grieve, for we all shine on like the moon and the stars and the sun. Thank you.
Janice M. Scott,
Randolph Scott.
Christopher J. Scudder,
Arthur Warren Scullin.
Michael H. Seaman,
Margaret N. Seeliger.
Anthony Segarra,
Carlos Segarra.
Jason M. Sexer,
Matthew Carmen Solito.
Michael L. Selbis,
Howard Selwyn.
Larry John Senko,
Arturo Angelo Sereno.
Frankie Serrano,
Marion H. Serva.
Elena Seychanova,
Adele Christine Sessa.
Sita Nirmala Sunareen,
Karen Lynn Seymour.
Davis Greer Cessna Jr.,
Thomas Joseph Scroy.
Jayas Shantalal Shah,
Khalid M. Shahid.
Mohammed Shahjahan,
Gary Shamai.
Neil G. Shastri,
Catherine Ann Shatsoff.
Barbara A. Shaw,
Jeffrey James Shaw.
Robert John Shea Jr.,
Daniel James Shea,
Joseph Patrick Shea,
Kathleen Shearer,
Robert M. Shearer,
Linda June Sheehan,
Hagay Sheffy,
Antoinette M. Sherman,
John Anthony Sherry,
Atsushi Shiratori,
Thomas Joseph Schubert,
Mark Schulman,
C. Wong Shum,
Alan Abraham Schwartzstein,
Claren Shelley Siegel Schwartz,
Joanna Sigmund,
Diane T. Signer,
Gregory Sikorsky,
Stephen Gerard Siller,
David Silver,
Craig A. Silverstein,
Nasima H. Simji,
Bruce Edward Simmons,
Diane M. Simmons,
Donald M. Simmons,
George W. Simmons,
Arthur Simon,
Kenneth Allen Simon,
and my husband, Mark Lawrence Charette. Mark, your whole family loves you and misses you every single day. Your legacy lives on in your 3 children. They are so much like you. I can still feel you watching over us. I will love you forever.
and my father, Joseph P. McDonald. I miss you every day and wish you were here to experience all of life's moments with me. I miss your smile, your hugs, and your never-ending jokes. 7 years was not enough time together, but I'm grateful for my memories of you and the stories that I hear about you from my family members, which make me feel like you're still here. I love you, and I try my best to live up to your legacy every day.
Michael J. Simon,
Paul Joseph Simon,
Marianne LaCory Simone,
Barry Simowitz,
Jane Louise Simpkin,
Jeff Lyle Simpson,
Cheryl D. Sincock,
Kamlade Kami Singh,
Roshan Ramesh Singh,
Thomas E. Sinton III,
Peter A. Syracuse,
Muriel F. Siskopoulos,
Joseph Michael Sisolak,
John P. Scala,
Francis Joseph Skidmore Jr.,
Toyena Corliss Skinner,
Paul Albert Skrizpek,
Christopher Paul Slattery,
Vincent Robert Slavin,
Robert F. Sluwak,
Paul Kenneth Sloan,
Stanley S. Smagala Jr.,
Wendy L. Small,
Greg H. Smallwood,
Catherine T. Smith,
Daniel Lawrence Smith,
Gary F. Smith,
George Eric Smith,
Heather Lee Smith,
James Gregory Smith,
Jeffrey R. Smith,
Joyce Patricia Smith,
Carl T. Smith Sr.,
Kevin Joseph Smith,
Leon Smith Jr.,
Moira Ann Smith,
Monica Rodriguez Smith,
Rosemary A. Smith,
Bonnie
More than 1 million travelers
Smithwick,
across this country delayed and kind of
Rochelle Monique Snell,
Christine Ann Snyder,
Diane Bullis Snyder,
Leonard J. Snyder Jr.,
Astrid Elizabeth Sohan,
Sushil S. Solanki,
Ruben Solaris,
Naomi Lee Solomon,
Daniel W. Song,
Marie Ray Soper,
Michael Charles Ceresi,
Fabian Soto,
Timothy Patrick Solas,
Gregory Thomas Spagnoletti,
Donald F. Spinpinato Jr.,
Thomas Spiraccio,
John Anthony Spataro,
Robert W. Spear Jr.,
Robert Spiesman,
Maynard S. Spence Jr.,
George Edward Spencer III,
and my uncle, James John Woods. We love and miss you every day. Give Grandma a hug for us.
and my brother Joseph Michael Giacconi. September 11th, we come here every year to come together as a nation. It's a useful way to mourn and grieve and remember. And 20 years is a nice round number. But for me and other family members, it's another day, it's another month, it's another year. I still get angry at all the things my brother missed. Joe, we love you, and we miss you.
Robert Andrew Spencer,
Mary Rubina Sperando,
Frank Spinelli,
William E. Spitz,
Joseph Patrick Spohr Jr.,
Klaus Johannes Sprockamp,
Saranya Sinuan,
Fitzroy St. Rose,
Michael F. Stable,
Lawrence T. Stack,
Timothy M. Stackpole,
Richard James Stadelberger,
Eric Adam Stallman,
Gregory Stike,
Alexandru Liviu Ston,
Corina Stan,
Mary Dominica Stanley,
Anthony Starita,
Jeffrey Stark,
Derek James Stakevicus,
Patricia J. Stats,
Craig William Staub,
William V. Steckman,
Eric Thomas Steen,
William R. Steiner,
Alexander Robbins Steinman,
Edna L. Stevens,
Andrew Sturgiopoulos,
Andrew J. Stern,
Norma Lang Sturuli,
Martha Jane Stevens,
Michael James Stewart,
Richard H. Stewart Jr.,
Sanford M. Stoller,
Douglas Joel Stone,
Lonnie J. Stone,
Jimmy Neville Story,
Timothy Stout,
Thomas Strada,
James J. Strain Jr.,
Edward W. Straub,
George J. Strouch Jr.,
Edward Thomas Strauss,
Stephen R. Strauss,
Larry L. Strickland,
Stephen F. Strobert,
Walwyn Wellington Stewart Jr.,
Benjamin Suarez,
David Scott Suarez,
Ramon Suarez,
Dino Xavier Suarez Ramirez,
Yoichi Sumiyama Sugiyama,
William Christopher Sugra,
Daniel Thomas Sur,
David Mark Sullins,
Christopher P. Sullivan,
Patrick Sullivan,
Thomas G. Sullivan,
Hilario Serranio Sumaya Jr.,
James Joseph Suazo,
and my aunt, Amy Nicole Jarrett, who was funny, outgoing, and always kept the family together. I was only 1 week old when my aunt passed away, but I honor you every single day with my name that you gave to me when I was born. You are my hero and the bravest person I've known. We love and we miss you.
And my father, Richard N. Polis, and my uncle, James P. Hopper. 20 years ago today, I went to school that beautiful morning, never anticipating the horror that was to come to my family and so many others. I've lived almost half of my life since then, and it has been bittersweet. My dad and uncle have missed so much. Our family has grown. My father didn't get to see my nephews grow into the amazing young men they are today, and he didn't get to witness the birth of my 2 nieces and my 2 daughters. It's heartbreaking they'll never get to hear his laugh. I often wonder what nicknames he would have given them. My uncle now has 2 grandsons and 2 granddaughters that will never get to enjoy him as their grandpa. Daddy and Uncle Jimmy, your absence is felt so much more as time passes. We long to hear you both laughing and joking. There is a giant hole in our family without you both. We all love and miss you more than I can ever put into words.
Colleen M. Sapinski,
Robert Sutcliffe,
Celine Sutter,
Claudia Suzette Sutton,
John Francis Swain,
Christine M. Swearson,
Brian David Sweeney,
Brian Edward Sweeney,
Madeline Amy Sweeney,
Kenneth J. Swenson,
Thomas F. Swift,
Derek Ogilvy Sword,
Kevin Thomas Sozik,
Gina Steinberg,
Norbert P. Sikorsky,
Harry Tabak,
Joanne C. Tabik,
Norma C. Tadai,
Michael Tadonio,
Keishiro Takahashi,
Keiji Takahashi,
Phyllis Gale Talbot,
Robert R. Tahami,
John Talagnani,
Sean Patrick Talon,
Paul Talty,
Marita Tam,
Rachel Tamares,
Hector Rogan Tamayo,
Michael Andrew Tamuccio,
Kanashiro Tanaka,
Rondell Sherry Tankard,
Michael Anthony Tanner,
Dennis Gerard Taramina Jr.,
Kenneth Joseph Tarantino,
Alan Tarasevich,
Michael C. Tarot,
Ronald Tartaro,
Deborah Tarolarella,
Darrell Anthony Taylor,
Donnie Brooks Taylor,
Hilda E. Taylor,
Kip P. Taylor,
Leonard E. Taylor,
Larissa Salone Taylor,
Michael Morgan Taylor,
Sandra C. Taylor,
Sandra Dawn Teague,
Carol W. T.P.,
Paul A. Techtmeyer,
Yashaban Moshwar Tembe,
Anthony Tempesta,
Dorothy Pearl Temple,
Stanley L. Temple,
David Gustav Peter Tingerlin,
Brian John
And as we
Terenzi,
continue to listen to the names in New York City,
Terry,
we see the images coming in from Shanksville. President Biden, the First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden. We knew that they were headed to Shanksville next, and there they are for the wreath laying.
my brother Angel Perez,
It comes a short time after those powerful images of the families of those 40 souls on board that flight, seeing the memorial up close for themselves, and now the president is there paying his respects.
Where's Maz? Is that Maz with the tripod? Yeah.
Call him. It's given to the crew member who carries the impossibly heavy iron tools, the ones used for prying open doors. Firefighter Scott Larson is climbing toward the 78th floor where the plane has hit. He is purposeful. He is steady.
I just got a report from the director of Morgan Stanley. 78 seems to have taken the brunt of the stuff. There's a lot of bodies. They said the stairway is clear all the way up, though. All right, 10-4, stop.
He is one of the first who has already made it up 48 flights of stairs.
What floor are you on? 48 right now. Guys, walk in. We're coming up behind you.
With his heavy iron tools, he continues to climb on. 34 minutes later, the tower collapses.
Never forget how brave people were, and people gave up their life to help someone that they didn't even know. And that's something that I feel is important.
His daughter Brenda is now a second-grade teacher and says childhood memories may be small, but they are potent. She and her dad at Disneyland loved Goofy. So she slipped a pair of Goofy ears into his casket.
People take things for granted, and it's hard, especially as we get older. It's hard.
It's interesting you say, especially as we get older.
I read a quote one time that I love this quote. It says that grief is not a place to stay, but it's a passage. And it's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of love.
Heroism of so many. In their names, we rebuild as a nation.
What if you could control the web with your mind? What if telekinesis was real? An interface for the same exact CSS properties used by the world's top designers and developers.
And did Mom ever say, are you sure? Maybe don't.
No, but she was my biggest supporter through it. I couldn't have got through the academy, what they call the 18 weeks without her.
me doing his laundry and packing his lunch every day. Truth be told.
It's the perks of living at home.
Making the hero.
Great men have walked this place. Great men have worked here. I can continue on his legacy. And I try to do the best I can every day, and hopefully, make him proud.
So what about all the babies we gathered together 20 years ago? What has happened to them over these 2 decades? The howlers, the unstoppable forces of life who teach us how you can learn to remember someone you never met.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Why the fascination with criminal trials? Figure out what's really out there.
She revealed she had murdered his family.
I know in my heart they did this.
It's the time of suspicion. The ending's really tough.
You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find unless you try to find it.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
Please begin.
This is the testimony of Elizabeth Holmes,
the Stanford dropout who appeared poised to change the world but didn't.
Her fall from grace was spectacular.
Elizabeth is finally going to trial.
This case will probably go down in Silicon Valley history.
But to this day, Elizabeth maintains her innocence. We'll take you inside the courtroom. If history is any indication, Elizabeth Holmes is not going down without a fight. Follow The Dropout, Elizabeth Holmes on Trial, wherever you get your podcasts.
24 hours, Assault on the Capitol, the ABC News original, exclusively on Hulu, now streaming. With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast, now streaming on ABC News Live.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
Robin Roberts, George Stephanopoulos, Michael Strahan. Wake up with America's #1 most watched morning show. ABC's
Good Morning America. Right now, with so much at stake, thank you for making ABC's This Week with George the #1 Sunday morning news show versus the competition.
Welcome to This Week.
ABC News, honored, winner of 9 Edward R. Murrow Awards, more than any other network, including winning for the 3rd straight year.
Tonight, President Biden defiant as Republican governors vow to challenge his sweeping new vaccine mandates. The president telling GOP governors planning lawsuits, quote, have at it, and accusing them of being cavalier about the risks of COVID, saying this isn't a game. Those new mandates impacting some 100 million Americans. Tonight, the stunning new CDC report showing the unvaccinated are 11 times more likely to die from COVID. And the major
vaccinated or I
over my building, and there's
just a few moments.
Is a somber.
This is an NBC News special report. America remembers 20 years later.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us in what is a somber and important day in America's history, the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. I'm Lester Holt here with Savannah Guthrie and Hoda Kotb. We are in Lower Manhattan, overlooking the site where the Twin Towers once stood. A powerful memorial to the nearly 3,000 people who lost their lives that day.
And you see our vantage point. We're in the shadow of the Twin Towers. This is a day that family members of those lost vowed never to forget. And so they gather every year to remember, reflect, and mourn the loved ones who were taken too soon.
I was just thinking that everybody watching at this moment is remembering probably exactly where they were to, whether you lost someone or not. And this morning, we are going to honor the sacrifices of so many on this 20th anniversary. We're going to speak to family members of the brave heroes who ran toward
Of dread, and I certainly felt it this morning.
Yeah, and even when you hear a plane fly over, which was such a weird feeling, I remember right after September 11th, it was so quiet. Whenever there was a plane, you were alarmed, and for some reason, sitting here, when a plane flew over, I sort of had those old feelings.
Yeah, you can't stop it. It just comes back.
Full autumn day.
We're back at 8 o'clock on this Tuesday morning. It's the 11th day of September 2001.
Al, it is such a pretty morning, isn't it?
Perfect fall morning.
That perfect morning came to a terrifying halt at 8:46 a.m.
We have a breaking news story to tell you about. Apparently, a plane has just crashed into the World Trade Center.
Flight 11 had crashed into the World Trade Center's North Tower.
It's quite terrifying. I'm in shock right now. I heard a boom, looked up, and there was a big ball of fire. I'm stuttering because I'm in such shock. I've never seen anything like it. It's horrible.
17 minutes later, Flight 175 hit the South Tower.
Oh, another one just hit. Something else just hit. A very large plane just flew directly over my building, and there's been another collision. Can you see it? I can see it on the shot. It literally blew itself into World Trade Center.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
As New York responded, President Bush, who was visiting a Florida school, was told by his chief of staff, Andy Card, America is under attack.
2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
The attack continued when Flight 77 flew into the Pentagon.
Apparently, it felt just a few moments ago like there was an explosion of some kind here at the Pentagon.
We now have confirmed reports that a plane crashed into the Pentagon.
For the first time ever, the entire U.S. airspace was shut down. Nearly 5,000 planes ordered to land immediately at the nearest airport.
This country, in terms of air travel, has been immobilized.
The White House and Capitol were evacuated.
We're looking at the White House, Mick, because we are learning that there have been some evacuations from the White House.
Then, the unthinkable.
Ladies and gentlemen, I need you to clear this block.
The building has collapsed. That tower just came down.
These pictures are beyond belief.
This is just the tip of the iceberg. There's going to be massive amounts of casualties.
At 10:03 a.m., a fourth plane, Flight 93, crashed near Shanksville, Pennsylvania.
Another large plane crashed as well, just north of Somerset County Airport, 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh.
Get away from this area! Get inside the building!
And 102 minutes after the first plane struck the World Trade Center, the North Tower fell.
The other tower of the World Trade Center has just collapsed.
This is war. This is a declaration and an execution of an attack on the United States.
And I think that was the hardest nut of all, was for us to understand this was war. That this was, everything had changed. And one man who had a front row to the national response, Andy Card, he served as chief of staff for President George W. Bush at the time, as we saw, by the way, former President Clinton at the memorial. Andy, what do you think? 20 years, what comes to mind?
Well, first of all, I'm haunted by the images that come back to us, and I feel triply convicted to make sure that we don't let people forget what happened 20 years ago. And the emotion of the day is something that those of us who are older than 20 years old can relate to. But the younger generation doesn't understand it. And I think we have a responsibility to convey to them the magnitude of the introduction of fear to people who lived in the United States, something that we never thought we would have to deal with. So it's fear. But on that day, I was all business after we learned about the second attack. The first attack we thought was an accident. And then obviously the second attack meant that it was not a coincidence. It was not an accident. It wasn't a true attack.
Well, Andy, let's talk about it, because you were the chief of staff to the President of the United States. It started, I think you told him, it's going to be an easy day today, sir. He was going to go read to second graders in Florida. But while he was there, it was you who had this solemn duty to whisper in his ear, there has been another attack. America is under attack. Tell me about that moment.
Well, first of all, today is a glorious day. It was a perfect day 20 years ago. There wasn't a cloud in the lower 48. It was just a perfect day. And I did tell the president it was going to be an easy day. He was going out for a run with a reporter that he was afraid would beat him, and he beat the reporter, so he felt good. And then he was going to talk about his favorite topic, which was leaving no child behind in education at an elementary school and reading with second graders. So it was going to be a great day. He heard about a small twin-engine prop plane crashing into one of the towers at the World Trade Center and went into the classroom. And then I heard it wasn't a commercial; it was a commercial jetliner, not a small twin-engine plane. Then, oh my God, another plane! And I knew that I had to deliver that message. I was thoughtful about what I would say. I wanted to be efficient with my words. I didn't want to have a conversation with him. I presumed a boom microphone would be over him. And I just whispered in his ear, a second plane hit the second tower. America is under attack. I believe that he digested what I said and became the president that day. The job was keeping his oath of office. It wasn't his agenda. It was keeping America's promise.
What was interesting to me, too, was the president said to you that he wanted to go back to D.C. He's like, let's take this plane back. And you had the task of, that was not going to happen. There was security at stake. So you guys had to do a lot of maneuvering before he wound up back in the nation's capital.
After he left the classroom, he went into a kind of a cafeteria/gymnasium and met with the crowd that had gathered there. And the first thing that he said out of his mouth, I'm sorry, I have to go back to Washington, D.C. And I'm thinking, he doesn't know we're going to Washington, D.C. We don't know where we're going yet. On the plane ride, he was so anxious to get there, and that's what we talked about.
We feel so silent.
We're going to be hearing the national anthem here at the memorial in a moment, but as we prepare for that, remind us, you obviously knew a lot more than the rest of us. How big did you think this attack was going to unfold at that moment?
Well, our fear was that there were many other attacks coming. So, first of all, I thought that there would probably be 20,000 people in the World Trade Center towers. So when I heard about the attack on the towers, I said, that could be 20, 30,000 people dying right there.
Yeah. As I was mentioning, we're so lucky to have your perspective here as we watch, and we want to now join the ceremony that is just unfolding. And in a moment, as we saw the Stars and Stripes being brought in, we will hear the national anthem. It's being sung by the Young People's Chorus of New York City. Let's pause and listen.
those on that flight and on the ground here at the Pentagon. But also today they remember thousands more, the American service members who lost their lives in Afghanistan fighting the war on terror there. 13 of them, as we witnessed, killed within the last couple of weeks at the Kabul airport. Now U.S. troops, of course, they have come home. But military officials here, they stress the need for Americans to stay vigilant, even as the nature of terror threats have changed. So is the way that we engage in that fight, no longer with boots on the ground, but drones on the sky, operations in cyberspace. Still, for all of those reasons, this day, it's very much a personal one here at the Pentagon. Shortly, we're going to hear from military leaders. We will pause for a moment of silence at 9:37, and taps will be played. Another powerful and poignant and, frankly, patriotic day as they unfurled a flag early this morning at the Pentagon. Savannah and Hoda.
He thanked me for other labels and places around this country, in fact around the world, where people are reflecting on the memories of those people that died innocently. They just were going about their business. Some people loaded onto a plane to go to Los Angeles to see their grandchildren. Some people were going to start a new job. Some were going to sell products. Some of them ended up being heroes that deserved the Medal of Honor because they said, let's roll. After saying a prayer, they rolled. And it just is overwhelming to me, but it is so important that we take this time to reflect and to remember and to be grateful for the service that so many other people gave as a result of this attack, that answered the call to duty.
I want to ask you about the moment when President Bush went down on the pile with the firefighters, grabbed the bullhorn, and really spoke for, I think, what a lot of people wanted to hear at that moment.
It was completely a spontaneous event. This was not a scheduled event. There were no script. There was no teleprompter. And I went to the president and said, Mr. President, would you be willing to say something? And he said to me, do you think it's appropriate? And I said, if you think it's appropriate, it's appropriate. And he said, I'm willing to do it. And I asked the Secret Service if we could have the president get up on this crushed vehicle. And an agent jumped up on the vehicle and jumped up and down a few times, gave me the thumbs up. And then Karl Rove found a firefighter, Bob Beckwith. And Bob got up there and held the spot for the president. And Nina Bishop somehow found a bullhorn for the president. And the president went up there and
well, the man in the crowd yelled, "We can't hear you."
I can't hear you.
Yeah.
The president said, I can hear you, and the whole world will hear us. Yeah. And I think it was one of the most dramatic, impromptu statements ever made by a leader. And it did cause us all then to give up our other labels and say, we're American.
That's what's so extraordinary about it. And I have to say, one of the aspects of this 20 years passing that does hurt your heart, because we did find that unity for a moment. And look, this was a country very divided after this divisive and controversial election. But in the days after, people just set aside those partisan labels. I'll never forget seeing the members of Congress walking out onto the steps of the Capitol, hand in hand, and singing.
Yeah. God bless America.
God bless America. And I just, you just hope that, God forbid.
At the White House, so this is a day that is seared in our memory, in our life experience. But I'm so grateful for the strength of leadership that President Bush demonstrated, not only that day, but in the hundreds of days that came afterwards. Because, presidents take an oath, but they cannot keep their oath without other people keeping their oath to follow the command of the president. And that is a burden a president carries even long after they leave office.
I just want to point out something very quickly for those who've never been to the memorial here. Each pool, 2 pools, represent the footprint of the 2 towers, and the reading of the names is happening right now. But I invite you, if you were ever in New York, to take the time to walk around these pools and read the names yourself. They are strangers, but as you see them all there, you're reminded of how it could have been anyone on that day. And it's actually quite emotional just to take a walk.
It is. Andy, thank you for being with us. We'll be with you throughout the morning. We can't leave it here at Ground Zero because, of course, tributes are being held in Shanksville and at the Pentagon.
Poignant and, frankly, patriotic day as they unfurled a flag early this morning at the Pentagon. Savannah and Hoda.
All right. Peter Alexander will be with you and the services at the Pentagon as this morning goes on.
We are joined now by retired Lieutenant David Lim. Lieutenant Lim was an officer with the Port Authority Police Department explosive unit. He was trapped in the rubble when the North Tower collapsed. It is good to see you on this day as people walk up here onto our set. Of course, we're looking at the area behind us, and I just wondered what your reflections are on this morning.
Well, I had the opportunity, since I came a little early today. Apparently, nobody wants me to be late. I went down on the site and I saw some of my fellow officers, that some of which weren't. I don't think there were more than 4 or 5 when this happened. Wow. And one of the older officers introduced me, and one of them turned around and says, "I believe I saw you on the History Channel." And I all of a sudden felt very old. But that being said, though, as far as my reflections, I think I'm reserving a lot of that for after this segment. I'm going to go down there. I've been authorized to be allowed on to the plaza, and I can reflect, over the names of my fellow officers, 37 of which were killed that day, of course, and all in one section. And I'll spend some time there and reflecting about how either quick or long 20 years seems. At sometimes, people ask me that question, how does it feel as far as time goes? And I tell them it depends on the moment. Like right now, it feels like yesterday, except for seeing those young fellows there, reminds me that I've moved on in my life. And I think that's partially important also. I think that it's important that we do move on in our life. When I was first coming out and speaking about this, I had an 8th grade child ask me, "I'm afraid. Well, what am I going to do if they come and bomb my school?" And I told them, you can't be afraid. If you're afraid, the terrorists win. And we don't want the terrorists to win. We have to move on with our lives and keep going forward. I think that's what I'm trying to do.
David, in about 2 minutes, we're going to have the moment of silence for when the second play.
Of course, I respect the loss of everybody that lost people.
Well, let's pause.
Impacted.
Anybody at the World Trade Center that was lost, but I've lost my dog, and I felt that for some reason.
He was your partner?
He was my partner.
All
That's
right.
one thing I have to remember.
David Lim, Lieutenant, thank you so much for sharing your story and being with us.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Chaos and the confusion in those moments here. From Robert Hogue, he says, "I recall being trapped inside our offices as the building burned around us." But there was also this sort of inspiring moment of community as the thousands who were here on that morning rushed together, many of them coming to help set up a makeshift triage area to try to look after those who had been injured, some of them badly wounded, badly scarred by the crash, badly burned, helping care for them in those moments. Later this afternoon, the President and the First Lady, they will arrive here at the Pentagon, the last of the 3 stops that they're going to make over the course of this day. But within the next hour or so, we do expect to hear from the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff as well, telling personal stories about the loss here, not just on that day, but in the years since in the war on terror that followed. Savannah, Hoda, and Lester.
All right. Thank you, Peter, at the Pentagon for us.
And people are also gathering this morning in Shanksville, Pennsylvania at the crash site of United Flight 93. NBC senior national correspondent Tom Yamas is there. Tom, good morning to you.
Hey, Lester, good morning to you. You know, like so many special places around the world, the memorial here for Flight 93 is hard to get to, but it is worth the trip. Before this happened, there really was nothing out here in western rural Pennsylvania, but now there is this beautiful memorial, and it is starting to fill up today. They're expecting the biggest crowd they've ever had before, and I want to show you a portion of the memorial right now. This is called the Wall of Names, and it is 40 marble pillars that together form that wall, and they follow the path that Flight 93 took. They have the names of the people who died, the passengers and crew aboard that flight, the heroes, of course. And we were here last night as family members and friends were leaving flowers, they were leaving lanterns, they were touching the names, taking photos, some were wiping away tears. And we're expecting Vice President Kamala Harris here today to deliver the keynote address along with President George W. Bush as well. And President Biden will be here later today to pay his respects. And I had a chance to speak with a lot of the relatives, including Charlie Green, his But those airphones, they called from the plane down to their loved ones to tell them they were getting together and they were going to fight back. Guys, back to you.
Yeah, Tom, thank you. And one of the things we learned in the Dateline was that the passengers, they had planned to storm the cockpit, but they wanted to wait till the airplane was over a rural area because they were so selfless in their thinking. They didn't want, obviously, the plane to come down over a big city.
Yeah, it's astonishing how brave they were, but also how quickly they analyzed that situation with such little information and changed the course of that day for the better.
Yeah, we'll be back in just a moment as America remembers 20 years later. For watching as the ceremonies unfold here.
Telling me they could see in America.
COVID.
Few coffee.
Solutions. And we learn to choose love over fear each day. And Lord, with your help, oh God, help us find hope and forgiveness in ourselves and in this world which we live, that we can make a difference to everyone around us. Lord, through your help, through your guidance, through your loving grace, we pray this in the
why we went or what the result was. We did in Afghanistan. We were
of the many, many lives that were lost.
Memorial taking place here. Craig?
Safe.
Do you think that even with the Taliban in power in Afghanistan, that we are at less risk of an attack on the scale of what happened here?
We're at less risk, I believe, because we have the way that we share intelligence, for instance, between the FBI and the CIA now, is more likely to let us see something coming in ways that we couldn't on September 10th. But I do worry with the Taliban back in power and with their well-known integration or collaboration with al-Qaeda, that al-Qaeda could rebuild that highly disciplined organization that has territory on which it can train and from which it can plot and plan. We're going to have to work awfully hard with no eyes and ears on the ground, no intelligence assets on the ground. We're going to have to work awfully hard to make sure that that doesn't happen again. And I don't think that it's necessarily even within our power, because the Taliban will decide how closely associated it becomes with al-Qaeda.
You have acknowledged that by virtue of the fact there was attack, that there wasn't enough done to prevent something like that. Can you tell me that your thought process across the 20 years as you review what you knew, what the government knew, what it was able to do?
In retrospect, whether it was 9/11 or Pearl Harbor or any other attack, you can always look back and put the picture together in a different way and say, oh, that meant that something was about to happen. I'm convinced intellectually that we did everything that we knew to do, given what we knew at the time. But on a personal level, 2,997 souls were taken on that day. And if you were in a position of authority, you feel remorse for that. Because by definition, we weren't able to do enough. We weren't able to stop the attack. But it makes you, if anything, more resolute that it's not going to happen again on your watch.
And take me into that day for a moment. You're National Security Advisor. You hear about the plane crash. You report to the president a plane has crashed into the North Tower here. What kicked in? Can you tell me what the priorities were and what the atmosphere was as you all worked this terror attack?
Well, once the second plane entered the World Trade Center, and then we knew that the Pentagon had hit, now you believe that every plane is potentially a missile. You don't know how many of them are in the air. We now know that Flight 73 of those brave passengers was probably headed for the U.S. Capitol. And so immediately you're trying to gather information, but I had to do a couple of things. I had to get in touch with President Putin in Russia because our forces were going up on alert. You didn't want Russian forces to start reacting because we're both nuclear powers. And I talked to him, and Lester, he said, yes, we know your forces are going on alert. Ours are coming down. And I remember thinking the Cold War really is over. And we had to get word out to every post in the world that the United States of America had not been decapitated because the pictures were awful. We couldn't speak. The vice president and I were in a bunker. The president was trying to get to a safe location from Florida. But one of the hardest was hearing the vice president ask the president of the United States, should the Air Force shoot down any airplane that is not responding properly? And then thinking for an awful few minutes that actually we had shot down Flight 93 because, after all, that order had been given, and thinking to myself that that was a terrible Hobson choice for a president of the United States to have to make.
George Bush was in the early months of his presidency. How did he change as a leader after what happened that day?
No president really comes into the presidency of the United States to be a wartime leader. And on that day, he became a president who had to lead a nation at war. And I saw him. He was always a resolute person, but now it was resolute in a different way, to be appropriately assuring to the American people when necessary, but to be very clear to our enemies that they were not going to prevail.
Former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, again, National Security Advisor at the time. One of the things I found most fascinating was how important it was to get the signal out that, yes, we've been attacked and we've been hurt, but we're still functioning as a government because, you know, think of the signals that were being sent across the world at that moment.
And former National Security Advisor Rice and Andy Card, who was here, talk about that moment aboard Air Force One. Andy Card said where President Bush received a call from Vice President Cheney seeking authorization in the midst of all this happening to be for our F-16s to shoot down a commercial airliner if the need arose, and President Bush saying, I was a military pilot. I could have gotten that order, and just the horror of that. Yes, he gave the authorization, but just imagine that. We want to go back to the Pentagon. This Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, we expect to be speaking. Oh, he is speaking. Let's take a listen.
And ladies and gentlemen, we must be tireless guardians of our ideals as well as our security, because we cannot have one without the other. Let me thank again the families of the loved ones and survivors for all that you have given and for the inspiration that you provide. The hallways that we tread were the ones that so many of them walked. It will always be our duty to fulfill their missions and to live up to their goodness and to stand guard over this democracy. We still work here. We still remember here. And we still uphold our values here. With clear heads and fearless hearts. Thank you, and may God protect the United States of America.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for God Bless America.
My dad.
United flight.
Yesterday, and they were telling me how much time it's taken to build this memorial, how much effort it's taken. They said in the beginning years, they could still go out to the trees and they would pick up debris from Flight 93 and they would bring it back to their homes because it tied them to their loved ones. It was all they had in many regards. Now there's a museum here where some artifacts are there and they tell the and they took over that plane and they were able to save what many people estimate to be thousands more by crashing here in Pennsylvania. Lester?
And Tom, thank you. And in my 40 some odd years in this business, the one thing that's always struck me, and I've said it time and time again, is we don't know what we are capable of until we are thrust and tested in a situation. We've all covered so many stories where you've just been in awe of what someone has done, and none of us knows, you know, what would have happened on that plane if we'd gone there.
Let's continue to listen, I think, because, you know, these are names that we should hear.
20 years ago, the world watched in horror.
Exactly where we were. I know you were in college, but take us through what happened to you on that day.
Yeah, I was in college at the University of Texas, and before then, and Andy knows this well, Barbara and I were a little nervous about being the kids of presidents. There's no guidebook, and as y'all know very well, we're not perfect. And so we had an agreement that the Secret Service would stay back and we wouldn't really see them, although you could see sort of men with fanny packs walking at the University of Texas. And that day there were a lot of men in our backyard, and we knew that something had changed.
For your dad and your mom.
As a man, and I knew that as sure as I know anything.
Streaming today.
Yeah.
But the president carries more burdens than all of us because he knows that he needed help keeping his oath. His oath he took to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, us. But he couldn't keep that oath if it weren't for others that would keep their oath to make sacrifices for this country. And so that's a burden that you carry even when you're no longer president. So he carries the burden of having to say thank you to those people who made sacrifices that he would never invite on anyone. But those sacrifices were necessary in order for us to have a safe nation.
And America was calling for immediate justice. Was there a
20-year
if
war.
something like this happened, how we would respond?
I'm sure the Pentagon would say they have roadmaps. I found that some of the maps were a little old and stale, but
more Cold War
oriented. Yes, but remember, this was an attack not from a nation state. All of the rules of war are written for nation states. They signed the Geneva Convention. Terrorists don't.
Yes,
So
sir.
They had played by no rules, and we played by all the rules. And that's the asymmetrical challenge you have in dealing with terrorists, that they don't comply with even rules of decency or respect. They don't respect the prisoners that they take. They don't comply with the obligations to be part of a diplomatic effort to solve a problem. They just want to introduce fear and generate, I'm going to say, disruptions and rancor, and they just don't want us to get along. And so that's the big challenge. And this was the first time the United States was attacked by a non-nation state that doesn't play by the rules.
There were so many indelible moments that they're unforgettable. One of them was when your father was just down there. We talked about it with Andy, standing on the pile of rubble and shouting to the first responders, "I hear you, I hear you." Another is the memorial service a few days afterwards when your grandfather, former President Bush, was there, and what that meant to your dad to have his father there. And as a comfort, but also as a former president who had faced those burdens.
That was, that photo, I think we can remember it, is so moving.
Hour of the World Trade
National or cultural differences are 40.
It is hard to describe.
Compassionate, conservative.
Wasn't the president's dad then? Wasn't he Desert Storm? Yeah. So would it be partially true to say that part of the attack was due to his son getting presidency? Yeah. Mm. Supplying them.
is getting some new presidential transport. While the VC-25Bs, which will be designated Air Force One when the president is on board, won't be delivered until 2024, some details about the upgrade are already in the public domain. Here's what we know about the replacement Air Force One so far. The US Air Force is sticking with homegrown plane maker Boeing to replace its two VC-25As. This time
Alexa,
it's opting for the
tell
latest
Xbox
version
to
of the
unmute.
Queen of the Skies, the 747-8. While any plane carrying the president is designated Air Force One, the two aircraft most frequently assigned that call sign carry tail numbers 28000 and 29000. The pair of modified 747-200s have been carrying VIPs since 1990 and have transported 5 presidents and numerous high-level officials over the past 30 years. The original agreement to replace Air Force One aircraft was made under the Obama administration. The Air Force selected Boeing to build a heavily modified version of its 747-8 in 2015, but in December 2016, even before his official swearing in, Donald Trump expressed his dissatisfaction regarding the cost of the program. Holding numerous meetings with then Boeing boss Dennis Muilenburg, the two settled on a figure of $3.9 billion. In a statement at the time, Boeing said, "Boeing is proud to build the next generation of Air Force One, providing American presidents with a flying White House at outstanding value to taxpayers. President Trump negotiated a good deal on behalf of the American people." The White House claimed that President Trump's strong-arm negotiations saved the American taxpayers some $1.4 billion on the original estimate of a cost of more than $5 billion. However, once all the costs involved in the project are taken into account, including buying a new hangar for the planes, the cost to the Air Force will be $5.3 billion, and that's before any overruns. Indeed, the top-secret technical manuals, which will run to more than 100,000 pages, cost $84 million alone. The new 747...
Yep, they're that 1%. Wow.
Sevens are based on the Boeing 747-8. This model has taken the basics of the 747-4 400 and beefed it up with technology from the Dreamliner, giving it a greater range, better fuel efficiency, and increased passenger comfort. The 747-8 will fly further and faster than the 747-200, all with a smaller impact on the environment. According to Boeing, per trip, the 747-8 emits 16 tons of CO2 less than the 747-200, although clearly this depends on the length of the sector. On the downside, reports suggest that the VC-25Bs will no longer have in-air refueling capabilities. The outgoing VC-25As have a refueling coupling on the nose of the plane, allowing the president to stay airborne for long periods. This has not been included in the specifications of the replacement jets, probably because despite having this capability, the VC-25As haven't had to use it much, if at all. While President Trump may not even get to fly the new Air Force One, depending on the outcome of the impending election, he was keen to put his stamp on the new planes anyway. The iconic baby blue is going out of the window by his hand to be replaced with a red, white and dark blue livery. Trump complained that the white and blue plane was too Jackie Kennedy, which is partially true as the liveries were designed under the Kennedy administration. However, they were actually created by design legend Raymond Loewy, famed for his industrial creations and logos, including work for Coca-Cola, Exxon and the US Postal Service. Boeing is looking to take until 2024 to complete the project. The airframes themselves have been sourced and are already at Boeing's modification facility in Texas. To save a bit of money on a factory-fresh 747-8, Boeing sold the government 2 aircraft that were built for Russian airline Transaero. The airline filed for bankruptcy before the aircraft could be delivered and had been stored in California awaiting a new owner. This will save the Air Force some cash, with a spokesperson telling Bloomberg, "We got a really good deal. I'm pleased with that." While the finer details of what's being done to the 747-8 details of what's been good deal, owner.
What?
This will save Zero. The airline filed for bankruptcy before the aircraft could be delivered and had been stored.
Uh-huh.
In California awaiting a new owner. This will save the Air Force some cash, with a spokesperson telling Bloomberg, "We got a really good deal. I'm pleased with that." While the finer details of what's being done to the 747-8 is highly confidential, we do know it'll include electrical power upgrades, a mission communication system, a medical facility, an executive interior, built-in retractable air stairs, and defense systems such as missile warning systems, chaff dispensing systems, and directional infrared countermeasures. Even if President Trump does win another term in office, the jets won't be delivered until the end of his presidency. Should the project timeline slip at all, he will have left office before they arrive. All things considered, it's highly unlikely that Trump will be the first president to fly on the new VC-25Bs. Do you think the 747-8 was the right choice for the new Air Force One? Let us know in the comments.
Is always a busy one. From meeting heads of state on the other side of the world to addressing local constituents in their hometowns, POTUS has to get from point A to point B fast, safely, and of course, in style. That's where the aircraft known as Air Force One comes in. Used by the American president for decades and even the inspiration for a blockbuster Hollywood action film, the call sign for the president's personal ride has become a household name. But as time goes on and technologies evolve, so too must Air Force One. So pack your bags and get ready for takeoff in the presidential suite. Because in today's video, we're taking a look inside the new and improved Air Force One. The term Air Force One itself is simply a call sign, and any aircraft that carries the American president immediately takes on the moniker. But it's the Boeing 747-200 that has been the model most associated with it since the 1990s. It's carried 5 US presidents and plenty of high-ranking officials over the last 3 decades. While most of us have flown on this Boeing model while traveling, the president isn't flying around in a typical passenger model. They require something a little more lavish and a little more luxurious. This Boeing 747-200 comes complete with multiple meeting rooms, 5-star guest cabins, communication rooms, and defense systems to keep one of the most important people in the world safe. But during the Obama administration, an order was placed for not 1, but 2 new replacement planes for the fleet. A very expensive order. Try $4 billion. Back in 2015, President Barack Obama chose to stay with the trusted Boeing company because not long before, Boeing had released their incredible 747-8 model, which included the extravagant VIP variant, which is fit for a king, or in this case, a president. This new and improved Boeing 747-8 can fly farther and faster, all while leaving behind a much smaller carbon footprint than its predecessors. While much of the new features are strictly confidential, some of the modifications were made public. For now, we know it will include electrical power upgrades, a mission communication system, a full medical facility, built-in retractable stairs, chaff dispensers, and state-of-the-art infrared countermeasures that can divert missiles by disturbing their guidance systems. It sounds like something out of a James Bond movie, but believe it or not, it's real. While Air Force One can be considered a White House of the skies, the incredible new model is built more like a flying fortress. And much like its previous iterations, this will be built to last for the next few decades. The new Air Force One comes in at 200 feet long with a 5,000 square foot interior. Not only is it larger than an NBA basketball court, but it is the longest passenger plane in the world. Its state-of-the-art wings and engines give it 17% more power and allow the aircraft to take off and land on incredibly short runways and reach speeds of Mach 1, just in case the POTUS needs to move quickly. It's the fastest passenger jet aircraft to date and probably the most important plane in existence. It truly is a plane like no other, but revamping the Boeing was no easy task. To pull it off took an enormous team of engineers and mechanics in order to completely gut the enormous interior. The interior of the new and improved Air Force One has a much more modern look. At the front of the aircraft is the presidential suite, which is only accessible by a very select few. It was given a southwestern design in the 1980s, but will receive one of the first major interior upgrades. The fold-out single beds in the presidential suite were swapped out for a queen-size bed, a much larger TV, and room for seating, giving the room a more welcoming and homey feel. The original plane has also had a bare-bones medical bay, but it has never consisted of anything more than a few seats. It looked more like a work office than it did a doctor's office. The redesign includes a hospital bed, medical-grade overhead lamps, a full sanitary station, and a heart monitor. It will be fully equipped for potential surgery and will even have a fully stocked pharmacy. The president can rest assured knowing they'll be getting the best medical attention should the need arise. The conference room will also be updated, getting rid of the old landline phones and replacing them with cell phones, and adding touchscreen monitors built into the desk. Past presidents have had problems getting important information to their teams on the ground using out-of-date technology, but those problems will be a thing of the past. Everything is moving away from analog and catching up to the digital age, and all of the power on board will be generated from the more eco-friendly and quieter engines, which use 16% less fuel than the previous model. Throughout the cabin are two small, cramped galleys, which will be converted into a space twice their current size, and with capacity for 2,000 meals, with food that is sourced in the US and served in the style of a 5-star restaurant. Since most of the President's guests aboard Air Force One are heads of state, it's important to keep them well fed and happy with dinners that are better than the meals most of us eat on the ground. The former cabin interior was a neutral and stale shade of brown, but will be painted white to give it a sleek and modern look. The interior will also be lined with full-sized windows throughout to give everyone on board some much-needed sunshine when things get stressful. And perhaps the most important room on board this 747-8 is the President's office, which will receive a full revamp with a sleeker modular look complete with all of the latest in communications technology. This will be the new Oval Office in the sky. Whether the President of the US is going on vacation or making an emergency trip, the new and improved Air Force One is a force to be reckoned with. Built to last with state-of-the-art defense systems, but also for maximum comfort, this fortress in the sky will hopefully serve future presidents with grace and luxury for years to come. But is there another presidential aircraft, past, present, or future, that surpasses the new Air Force One? Let us know what you think in the comment section below. Remember to hit that like button and make sure to subscribe to Insane Luxury if you
What's that?